Welcome into another edition of Go Local Wisconsin. We're going to take a little bit different approach this time around, but I think going local is going to be the key and a key element to really getting over some of the hurdles that are currently facing us relating to vaccine hesitancy, relating to questions and misinformation regarding masks as well, COVID vaccines, and just the disease itself. So once again, I bring in a good friend, Aric Dahl here. Now, Aric is a molecular geneticist, has worked in science labs for decades. He has his PhD, and he's a person that can really take some of the science and some of these terms and really explain it in a way that is understandable for the rest of us, which is great. So I just wanted to have him on to bring some more information about the vaccines, about how vaccines work, and a little more specifically about what's in the COVID vaccines and how those work. So hopefully that helps get that information across to everybody. Aric, thanks so much for making time for us today to do this and be on Go Local Wisconsin. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Jason.
So there's different vaccines. First off, there's three main ones. There's the Pfizer, then Moderna, and also the Johnson & Johnson vaccines. And then, so there's some differing reactions to those, and also two or multiple doses, and the Johnson & Johnson is just a single dose. However, people's experiences have been different. The one thing I'll say is I think the majority of people I've spoken to have had a little bit more of an impact from the Moderna vaccine in terms of maybe having fevers, having chills. So a little bit stronger reaction that their body is doing what it needs to do in response to that than the Pfizer vaccine or the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
I think that's a good point to recognize is that there are three major vaccines, at least in the US, that are available. But the bottom line is they all really do the same thing. They've been shown to be effective in preventing really severe illness if you do get COVID. They've been shown to be extremely effective in preventing death if you do get COVID. And that's an important thing to remember is, yes, most people that do contract COVID, symptoms aren't that bad. You might say it's not as bad as the flu, but there are people who do die from it. There are people who do end up in intensive care on a ventilator. There are people who have lingering health effects, cardiovascular problems, damage to their heart, people having blood vessels causing problems in their limbs and extremities. And it's a low percentage, but personally, I'd rather not take that risk, right? I mean, you could say it's a low percentage, it doesn't affect many people unless you're the person that is affected by it. So by getting a vaccine that can protect you from the worst of the worst, why not? These three vaccines, two of them are mRNA vaccines, which is new and different. To say they're new, it's new in that it's the first time they've been widely used as a general public vaccine. But the technology itself isn't entirely new. These are things that scientists have been researching for years. So it's not just some new technology that was dreamed up, kind of spur of the moment once COVID hit. The Johnson & Johnson is using a more established technology, but really they do essentially the same thing where they're introducing a small information to make a small piece of protein that would identify the SARS-CoV virus that causes COVID. It's mimicking a piece of that virus so that your immune system recognizes it. And the way, here talk about antibodies. The antibodies are your body's response to recognize invaders outside, foreign viruses, bacteria, whatever that could cause your body harm. And these antibodies recognize these foreign molecules. Basically, it's like a lock and key system. So these proteins recognize it's an identical match or identical fit to what they're going to use to target your immune system to these cells, kill them, get rid of them, get them out of your body before they establish an infection and make you sick. So all three of these major vaccines that are being used are using just slightly different technologies to introduce this, to make your body produce this protein, the spike protein that everybody's heard about, make the spike protein that is a characteristic of the SARS virus that's causing COVID, so that your body will recognize the real virus should you get infected. So it's basically tricking your body to ramp up a defense so that when you get a real infection, your body is ready, primed up. It's got the defense there. It's going to kill this thing off before it has a chance to make you really sick. None of these three are making you transgenic. They're not making you mutant. I'm sorry, getting your vaccine is not going to turn you into Wolverine. Um, it's using like mRNA, it's messenger RNA. It's the way your cell goes from DNA to making protein to make everything in your body happen. Right? It's just the blueprints. All it is the little message that is using the cell machinery to make this protein to express to trigger the reaction in your immune system. It's not a functional virus. It's just one little component on the outside of the virus. It's just a feature. It's like looking at your nose, looking at your ear, whatever. It's a hallmark characteristic of this virus. On its own, the spike protein doesn't do anything. The spike protein is not going to make you sick. It is not going to give you COVID. It cannot get passed on to somebody else. And I think being new, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of uncertainty. People don't really understand what's happening. And I think I can certainly understand how that would cause some reservation, right? People should be aware of what's going into their body. They should be informed about making decisions about what they want injected into their body. I get it. But by the same token, when you're making this decision, look at trusted sources. Don't believe everything you see on Facebook or Twitter or Reddit or whatever. Go to credible sources. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Make an educated decision. If you have concerns, that's understandable. But go find some credible sources to learn a little bit more about what your body's actually doing when it encounters these mRNAs or the viral vector that's being used in the Johnson & Johnson instance. So sorry, maybe that's getting a little ahead of where you wanted to go with that question, but I was rolling.
Hey, you might as well keep on it. The explanation of it is key. I think that's something that was lacking. I think what's happened is, this pandemic hit so hard and so fast. Some people were very afraid. Some people were not taking it seriously enough. Some people were just uninformed. Some people were maybe taking in too much information from so many sources and didn't know what to believe. And then the whole idea was, okay, can we restrict things enough to kind of squash this? And that didn't work in this country. So then they had to turn their attention to vaccine. We got to get this vaccine to get us to the point where we can get over the hump on this, where we can get herd immunity, where we can be in a place where this isn't going to be so devastating to people, killing people, having people being so infected all over the place and spreading and just taking over. I think the assumption was that everyone's just going to be so happy there's a vaccine, they're going to get it. Well, there's a lot of people working against that idea, first off, from different sources. But in addition to that, you have people who just are, they want to know more. They want to be more informed. But one thing I think is really important about the whole deal is about how vaccines work. And I don't like the term. I said this to my wife right away. I was like, I don't like that they're calling these things side effects, because that relates in people's minds. It relates too much to like medications. When you have a bad effect to a medication, when you have some sort of reaction, your body is doing something. When you get this vaccine, to me, that's a good sign in many cases, because it means your body recognizes there's something different in there and it's acting appropriately.
I think the use of the term side effect is just, it's not the intended effect. It's not exactly what you're going for. What they're going for with this vaccine is priming your body to protect you from getting really sick if you get infected with this virus. So secondary effects, maybe that would be a better way to term it, secondary effects or additional effects. But you're right. I mean, how many people have had a fever, had a cold, you feel a little lousy, you feel achy, you feel tired, you run a little bit of a fever. That's your body's natural response to fighting off an infection. And that's essentially what's happening in this case. When you have this vaccine, just to clarify a little bit, so when you inject the RNA, it's not the RNA itself that's triggering the reaction. What the RNA is doing is the cells that take up this RNA are reading it like a blueprint. And again, the natural processes in the cell are making that protein. So instead of injecting the protein, you're injecting basically the instructions for your cell to make it for you. So it allows the vaccine to be produced much more quickly. It allows it to be adapted if they need to change it to make more effective or target a different virus. that protein is presented and your immune system sees this and it sees this protein, okay, your immune system, it's a cell seeing this, seeing another cell. It's not looking through a microscope. It doesn't see that this isn't actually a coronavirus. It's just picking up this molecular marker, this protein, and it's like, whoa, this isn't part of my body. This is not here. This looks like a virus. Let's fight it off. Let's kill it. So that, especially a lot of people getting their second dose, their immune system's primed for this. And that's what the second dose is doing, is it's really giving your immune system a kick in the pants to get it going. And, don't be disappointed if you get that reaction, because that, like you said, that's your immune system doing its job. It's showing a response. It's recognizing this protein. Now, if you're one of the fortunate people who don't have a reaction, as I said, other than a little sore spot in my arm where I got jabbed, I didn't have any ill effects from it. That doesn't mean it's not working, right? I mean, there's many times that your body's fighting off bacteria, viruses, whatever infection, and you don't even know it's there because your immune system's doing its job. If you get a reaction, if you don't, it doesn't really matter. It's still there. Your immune system is doing its job. So don't be afraid that it didn't work if you don't show some of these symptoms. And right. It's so variable from person to person. I know people who got the Pfizer vaccine that felt pretty crummy for a few hours. A lot of people feel just fine. The Moderna, same thing. Some people say their first dose, they felt just kind of off, and the second one, they felt fine, and vice versa. Admittedly, this is new. This is a completely new virus. Coronaviruses have been around, but this particular one that's causing problems in people is new. We're still learning a lot about it. You look at what's known about it now compared to a year ago at this time, and we've come light years, right? We understand so much better now, but you learn that by looking at things, testing things, learning as you go. So, I don't think anyone really fully understands why some people show a stronger reaction or some don't. Maybe it's as simple as there are a lot of coronaviruses out in nature. Maybe you've been exposed to other coronaviruses and your antibodies recognize something that's similar to the piece of the protein that's being introduced with this vaccine. There's some variability, but I think the important thing to keep in mind is that even if you feel kind of crummy and maybe flu-like for 12 hours or a day, personally, I think that's a heck of a lot better than ending up in the hospital or getting a full-blown case of COVID. I know people who had it and felt completely wiped out for the better part of a week, 2 weeks. So for me, 12 hours versus 2 weeks, that's an easy one for me.
Right. And in the process, you're not potentially spreading it to others and all of that and making your household at risk. And especially with kids too, we both have kids and they haven't been able to be fully vaccinated yet. We're not at that point, but hopefully we're getting there. We're getting closer. I think that's such an important thing to point out, that because there are going to be those questions when you have, everyone doesn't react the same. And some people don't have any sort of reaction to it. That doesn't mean it's not working. Just means your body is again reacting a little bit differently, and there are a number of factors there, but it's still doing what it should be doing. For me, my personal experience was first shot of the Pfizer vaccine was really nothing. Arm was a little sore. That was it. And then the second dose, though, I did what I felt was about 5-6 hours in, I just started to feel really kind of wiped out, really kind of fatigued, and then I can't explain it any other way. I didn't feel sick. I didn't have any fever. I didn't have anything like that. But what I did have was I could feel my body working on stuff. Like you could just feel my system working because it was taking a lot of my energy. And so that's why I felt fatigued for a day or two. Not extreme fatigue like I did for about 4 hours or so that first night. But for a couple of days, I was kind of easily fatigued, a little tired, more tired than normal. And after that, it was almost like a switch was flipped and we were done. So that was my experience.
Shifting gears slightly, reasons why to get it. There's some people who have had COVID, they contracted it over the last year and a half and are saying, I've already had it. Why do I need to get the vaccine? And I think that's an excellent question. It's a very fair question. As I kind of alluded to earlier, getting the vaccine doesn't mean you can't possibly get infected with COVID. It just, at this point, means you're not going to get really sick from it. It means you're really unlikely to get a bad enough case that you're going to be able to transmit it to someone else. But in vast majority of people, it means you're probably not going to get COVID. You're not going to get sick enough to even notice it's there. Your body's going to kill it off before it gains hold. So, as you were saying, it's important because if you don't get a bad enough case of it or you really get infected with it, you're not going to be able to spread it to other people. If you've had it, I mean, yes, your body has made antibodies to the virus when you were sick, but the vaccine tends to be a much stronger, much more specific dose of it, right? The amount of this unique protein, the spike protein, is going to be much higher in the vaccine. And you know your immune system is targeting that specific thing that's going to really recognize the virus that causes COVID. Where if you had a mild case, your body might have had a weak response, it killed it off. Maybe you were one of the people who weren't going to get real sick from it anyway. But also your immune system is potentially recognizing the entire virus, and some of that might not be specific to SARS-CoV-2, the one that causes COVID. It could be another coronavirus where, yeah, it might keep you from getting really, really sick, but you could still get pretty sick from it. And there's certainly been cases where people have been reinfected. It doesn't happen frequently, but there are documented cases where people have been infected multiple times with COVID. They do the test to show that there is active virus in them. So even if you had it, you get the vaccine, it's going to give you amped up protection. Instead of having your resistance here, your protection level is going to be up here. There's myths, people trying to find correlation between if you've had it, you get sicker when you get the vaccine. It's not always true. You know, is that a factor? It could be. But again, getting that level of protection, personally, I would feel better knowing that I'm protected at the level that's going to keep me from ending up in the hospital. It's going to keep me from, you know, having irreparable heart or lung damage or dying from it, even if I were to feel kind of crummy for a day, 2 days, whatever. So having had COVID is not guaranteed protection. Having had COVID does not mean that you're going to get sick from taking the vaccine. And again, the vaccine is not going to infect you with COVID. You do not get COVID from taking the vaccine. You cannot pass it on to anybody else from getting the vaccine. And I think those are some of the major concerns or misinformation or just misunderstandings about it. The vaccine is not a functional version of the protein. It's just a little tiny piece that helps your body recognize it. So it's, again, is much more specific than if you've gotten sick from COVID naturally. The vaccine will still boost up your response. It's still protection. It's still a good idea to get vaccinated, even if you've had the disease yourself.
I think that's really important to say to people. This is the other reason I wanted to talk with you about this, is because, and put this out on this this format and this program, is because I think people talking to people they know, hearing from people they know, is going to be the key to getting more people that are hesitant or not feeling comfortable or don't think they need to take the vaccine for whatever their reason is, to getting them to the point where they would consider it and hopefully do it. It's going to your local communities. It's talking to your neighbors. It's having those conversations about what was the experience like for you. I think that's really important because of what's happened in our media and what's happened to our media on some levels over the last handful of years. And all of what's happened with the internet, where there's so many different sources that can put out information and appear as news. And so many people don't know what's news and what's not news and what's a reliable source and what's not, to the point where we need to communicate this on a local level. I think the government has to do a better job, our states, our local governments too, but everyone, all of us, talk to people about it. Don't be afraid to talk to them about it. I know who knew that we were going to have such big disagreements and freak out about wearing masks during this time, but we did. The people that want to fight, I guess, will maybe try to avoid them, but there are ways to talk about this where you're not trying to attack and butting heads and talking down to people, It's more about trying to get the information to them and explain some things to them that you understand. And I think that's how we can hopefully get more people on board, because that's the key, Aric. Let's look at this, right? Right now, like in the state of Wisconsin, okay, we've had almost half of the population with at least one dose of the vaccine already. But things have slowed down. Last week, Wisconsin requested a fraction, less than 10% of the vaccine doses that they were scheduled to get, because it's slowed down in terms of the interest of the people wanting to get out and get vaccinated. If we have this situation where not enough people get vaccinated, what can happen?
I think that's a very good concern. So we've seen a similar trend here in Minnesota, which, they got the vaccine out, rolled out pretty efficiently. Certainly by now, most adults who want a vaccine should have had some opportunity. But in the Twin Cities area, for sure, there's certain parts of the community that either haven't had access because, at least early on, a lot of the vaccination clinics were outlying areas. So people in the city who don't have their own transportation, can't take time off of work, can't make it to these big vaccination clinics, have they really had the opportunity to get there? Fortunate for me, there was a location about a mile and a half from my house that I could stop on the way home after work, and it was easy. But for someone who doesn't have a car or relies on bus or some other public transportation to get places, if you haven't been vaccinated, public transportation is kind of a scary place if you're concerned about contracting the virus. And it's just availability. And there are certainly communities that understandably don't trust the government on face value because of things that have happened in the past. So yes, it is really almost hyper local, where you need to get into your neighborhood, you need to get into your circle of family and friends. And if you have people who are resistant to this, find out why. Especially the last several years, so many things in this country have been so divisive that, like, if someone pushes you some way, it's almost just instinctive to push back or get defensive about it. And this isn't something you get defensive about. It's, if they have concerns, what are they concerned about? Is it something that is a valid concern due to their health situation or moral situation, whatever? Or is it something that they just don't have? They have questions. They don't have all the information. They want to be able to make the right decision for what they're getting injected into their body, and that's perfectly understandable. But I think a lot of it is the fear, the unknowns, the uncertainty, and it's new. And I understand it. I completely get it. And I think, as a scientist, that's something that struck me a few weeks ago when I saw a news piece where they're interviewing people asking what their concerns were. Why hadn't they been vaccinated yet? And there's a young woman who they were interviewing who said she had heard it makes people sterile. And she wasn't going to get it because she doesn't want to risk sterility before she's had a chance to have kids. If that was a real risk of this, that's a completely valid concern. However, there's nothing in this vaccine that is going to cause fertility issues, right? What's getting injected is something that's not normally found in your body. It's not going to interfere with, fertility. It's not going to make you sterile. It's not going to cause whatever problems you might have heard about. It doesn't interfere with breastfeeding. That was another concern I had heard. This mRNA is not causing these problems. And that's something that, look to the CDC. The vaccine manufacturers have information about the vaccine, what's in it, what it's doing. Some of them have frequently asked questions pages. Point people to these. If you have someone who's resistant to get these and they have these concerns, especially if it's something that you can relate to or you can understand, or you can show them, hey, I got this and it's okay. Like, this isn't something you really need to be worried about. I think that's important. And don't push it. Don't call them an idiot for not doing it. Don't say you're crazy for not doing it. They might have really good reasons for not doing it. And just being afraid of the unknown is certainly valid. But how do you get around that? You can educate the public. Make that information available more easily, so you don't have to go and try to read science jargon to figure out what it's doing and what the risks are. Where, hey, I like science jargon. I'm not bagging on that. But most people, if you give them the safety data sheets from the vaccine manufacturers, it's going to be too long, didn't read about 3 sentences into it. So, these campaigns where they're trying to promote people getting vaccinated, like, simple bullet points addressing some of these major misconceptions, or for more information and send it to some, credible site that, state health departments, if you don't trust the CDC, state health departments, local health departments, whatever, even local clinics, have frequently asked questions, or just some way to address these questions people have. And I think that's really important. Like, how do you get something new to be accepted? It just has to get out there and people need to do it. And word of mouth is incredibly important for this. If someone has one bad experience, whether it's the vaccine or a restaurant or a car dealer or whatever, I mean, that's there's a lot of people they know on this. If you had a positive experience with it, tell people. So, and I think one of the major differences between masking up and getting vaccinated is wearing a mask properly. Every time you go out in public, every time you're in a crowded situation, that's something you're really doing. In most instances, you're doing for the people around you. In case you were carrying it and didn't know it, you don't want to spread it before you knew you were carrying it. Getting vaccinated, the majority of the benefit is to you personally. Okay, like, it's protecting you from getting really sick and protecting you from dying, with the added benefit of, if you can't get sick, you're not going to spread it to other people. So, if you want to think about what you can do to protect yourself, this is really about protecting primarily you, number one, first. So if you're concerned about people not wearing masks in the store, okay, protect yourself, protect your family, protect your parents, protect your brothers, sisters, your kids if they're 12 or over. Get them injected and protect them. Then it doesn't matter what the Yahoo up the street is doing, or the person coughing on you in the grocery store. If you get enough people protected, we don't have to worry about it spreading in the community, because there's nowhere for it to go. And I think, coming back to your original question, why is it important for people to get vaccinated? In an unvaccinated population, it's spreading, it's growing, it's doing what viruses do. Many of your listeners have probably heard of these different variants starting, the UK variant, the variant from Brazil or India or wherever. These are things that just naturally happen. That's what life forms do. That's what viruses do. And what they're referring to is in the genetic code, in this RNA that's encoding the virus. It's basically a mutation. One of the letters in the genetic sequence is changing. And that happens all the time in viruses, bacteria, even your cells. That's how people get cancers and things forming. It happens. More developed organisms have systems in place to catch these and fix them before they become a problem. Viruses are very simple. They don't have that in place. So when this change happens, that organism now has that. Most of the time, it's something bad, where the protein doesn't work anymore and the virus can't replicate. It dies off. Sometimes that change will maybe make it a little more infectious, so it spreads a little more easily. And that's what you're hearing about. Some of these variants seem to be more infectious, where they get into your cells a little bit better. That one change causes them to be a little bit more effective at getting into your cells. Sometimes they can have changes that make it harder for your immune system to detect them. And that's where the concern comes in. You've got people who are unvaccinated, and you have this big pool of people that this virus can keep growing and potentially mutating and making a change that could cause widespread problems again. So the fewer people that you have that are not vaccinated, the fewer opportunities there are for this population of virus to grow and change and have these changes that could cause new problems. We're not at herd protection levels yet. Okay, they're estimating that to be about 70% of the population fully vaccinated. What they're talking about are people who are fully vaccinated not needing to wear a mask, because once you've been fully vaccinated, 2 to 3 weeks after your second shot of Moderna or Pfizer, 2 to 3 weeks after your one shot of Johnson & Johnson, your body is ramped up, ready to rock and roll. If you get sick, it's going to kill it off before you can get infected and spread it to people. So again, as I mentioned earlier, wearing the mask is to prevent you from spreading it to someone else if you get sick. So fully vaccinated people don't need to wear a mask. But if you're not fully vaccinated, like say you got your first shot yesterday, you could still get sick. So relaxing these guidelines for the people who are fully vaccinated is not the same as saying we've reached the level we need for herd immunity. And that's one of the things that I've heard the last couple of days is, oh, the CDC said we're at herd immunity levels. And no, you're selectively interpreting what they said. You're only listening to part of what they said. So if we want to reach that level, it means getting more people vaccinated. 3 out of 4 of your friends need to get vaccinated to really hit that level. Get it out there. You want to get back to normal, do your part. Try to get other people to do their part. But I think we also need to be careful not to be pushy about it, because you push and people are going to resist just out of principle,
Right.
even if it's in their best interest to do it. And it's not a political thing. If you're worried about what your friends or family are going to think if you get vaccinated, they're not going to know. Go get vaccinated. Don't tell them you're protected. If they don't want to get protected, hey, that's their problem. But it's not like wearing a mask where you're going to get shamed for walking down the sidewalk by someone who thinks that it's stupid or the virus is fake. Well, guess what? The virus is not fake. People really do die from this. People are still dying from it. It is still a problem. Just because it's not, headline news every day about how many people have died, there are still people dying from it. And, this is a big problem. Look at the news in India. If you're not following the international news, just Google India and COVID and the situation they have going on there.
Yeah.
That's what happens when it starts to tear through community and we don't have protections in place. And I don't really want to get into the masking, shutdown, distancing, whatever. I think that's been covered plenty of times over the last year, but people can say that didn't do anything. Well, I think it did, because it kept hospitals manageable. And the scary thing is, once it's spread widely enough in the community that enough people are getting sick, if it's the 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, whatever, that are sick enough to go to the hospital, once that hospital's full and those hospital beds are occupied for weeks at a time by someone who's sick and spreading out of control in the community, it's too late. Then you get the people dying. And we don't want to get to that point, right? We don't want to be like India. We don't want to be like Brazil, some of the countries in South America, where it has been managed here largely by policies that a lot of people don't agree with. And it's understandable. No one likes to be shut down. No one likes to lose work. But you need to keep in mind that the reason numbers have been going down is that there were measures in place to mitigate this. If we just go back to normal without getting vaccinated, the virus is still out there. Even if you're not seeing it constantly in the news or people are not wearing masks, that doesn't mean it's gone. Sorry, that was my soapbox. I'll climb down now.
All very good points. I mean, I think that's the thing to keep in mind. It's that we, even though things are trending in the right direction, and I get it. Everyone wants to get to that place where this is pretty much in the rearview mirror and we're past it and we're feeling like we're back to as normal as possible, but we're not there yet. And if we don't stay vigilant and aware, and mindful, it can turn around and go in the other direction pretty fast. And the other key thing is, this is what I wanted to stress people, because I already saw, this became political. This wasn't a political issue, but people made it political to try to divide people and get people motivated and combative and all those things. Social media became combative, all these sources, but the virus is not a argumentative tool. It's not a political tool. It's a virus. And it doesn't care whether you think it's real or not, or whether you think you should be vaccinated or not. It's still going to infect you if it gets a chance. So do yourself a favor. In this case, if you've been wearing masks, you've been doing other people a favor, and we appreciate that. If in this case, do yourself a favor and get your vaccine and help us all get past this thing. That's my words to you. So Aric, I thank you so much for your time, and taking the time to explain some of this stuff in a very understandable way. I appreciate that. And just kind of understanding too, like how the mRNA works and how these vaccines specifically work and what they can do for you. And I mean, the level of efficacy, we've heard about that, like how effective they are. That's great. But to understand how it gets to that point, I think is also really helpful for a lot of people. So thanks for taking time to explain that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope all of you out there stay safe, be well, If you haven't gotten your vaccine yet, it can be very simple. There are a lot of different resources to look into places that are offering it. So look into those. And like I said, we told you about our experiences. Some people's have been very different. Some people's have been very similar, but the majority of people have very little reaction to any vaccine, get the benefit from it. And we want to all get to herd immunity and get back to life. So stay well, be well. We'll catch you again next time on Go Local Wisconsin.